Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Council's Tuesday, November 16th session. This morning we'll begin with a proclamation recognizing World Pancreatic Cancer Day. Let me turn the floor over to Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and good morning to everybody. This is a important month, and I'm really proud the Council has been really recognizing a lot of these recently. November is Pancreatic Cancer Month, and actually November 18th is Pancreatic Cancer Day. And I'm pleased to present this proclamation, and we have some guests with us today from the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, or PanCAN, and I see them with us now, and we'll get to them shortly. Their vision is to create a world in which all patients with pancreatic cancer can thrive. And unfortunately, every day, more than 1,200 people worldwide will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And it's sometimes called, if you've known anyone who's had it, it's really operates this way, as a silent disease, because the symptoms aren't really noticeable in its early stages, and they're very easy to ignore and can be vague. And even though overall death rates to cancer are declining, death rates for pancreatic cancer are increasing. So early detection becomes very important for all cancers, but particularly pancreatic cancer. The incidence of pancreatic cancer in African Americans also is 50 to 90% higher than in other racial groups. And African Americans, unfortunately, have some of the worst prognosis, and the survival rates have not increased. And so it's one of the really important missions of PanCAN and those who are trying to increase awareness in early detection and treatment. We have to fight this disease, and we have to support it as we search for a cure, the funding and the research. And so I wanted to bring and allow for a couple of minutes introduce our guests, Ms. Treva Wright, who is with us, who is the outreach chair of the Pancreatic Action Network, Ms. Maggie Walsh, who's the senior community relations manager for the Pancreatic Action Network, and I think we also have Mr. Robert Williams. Yes, I see him there as well. So I want to turn it over to you all for just any brief comments you want to make about the proclamation, and then we'll read the proclamation. Ms. Wright, Dr. Wright.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Treva Wright. I am a Montgomery County resident and business owner, and currently the outreach chair for the PanCAN DC affiliate. I would like to thank Councilman Jawando and his wonderful team for giving us this space today to spotlight World Pancreatic Cancer Day and November Awareness Month. My own story is that I lost both of my parents to this terrible disease in 2019 and 2020. I have joined PanCAN as a volunteer and outreach chair in a mission to take bold action to improve the lives of those affected by pancreatic cancer by advancing research, building community knowledge, and advocating for patients. As Councilman Jawando said, pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths and the world's toughest cancer, with a 5-year survival rate. Again, thank you for this space, and if you know someone who is affected by this disease and would like resources, feel free to contact myself, Robert, or Maggie, who have also joined me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wright. Maggie, would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman Jawando, and thank you, Treva and Robert, for joining us today. We're so grateful to have this space to spread awareness, as you both shared, for such a critical disease, and for a disease with a low survival rate as pancreatic cancer that has so few treatment options. As you touched on, Councilman Jawando, research is key to improving patient outcomes. So we just want everyone in the community to know that PanCAN is here as a resource for you all. If anyone you know needs support, please contact PanCAN's patient services for free personalized resources and hope. We are here and available to you, and the phone number is 877-2PANCAN. And we also invite the community to join us this Thursday, November 18th, which is World Pancreatic Cancer Day, to join us in wearing purple. You can post on social media. And if you're interested in walking with us locally to end pancreatic cancer, please save the date for April 30th, 2022, which is our PanCAN Purple Stride, Maryland, as well as Washington, D.C., where you can walk to honor and remember your loved ones and help us to continue to improve patient outcomes by raising those critical funds. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. That was important information, and I'll definitely be modeling and posting and walking next year. Mr. Williams.
I believe that Maggie and Dr. Wright have covered most of the major points that I think we should discuss. Again, we're here. Thank you so much for giving us this platform to talk about this very important issue today. And with that, I will turn it back to you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'll read the proclamation here, which we will get to you in actual physical form as well. And we'll make sure you have it. And this is from the entire county council, Montgomery County Council. Whereas pancreatic cancer is the 11th most common cancer in the United States and kills more than an estimated 48,000 people each year. This represents about 7% of all cancer deaths in our country. And whereas in the United States, there will be more than 60,000 diagnosed cases of pancreatic cancer in 2021, with the 5-year survival rate being just 10%, pancreatic cancer will impact an estimated 1 in 64 people in their lifetimes. And whereas, despite there being no direct cause of pancreatic cancer, there are certain risk factors that can increase the likelihood of an individual developing pancreatic cancer. Those who suffer from long-standing diabetes, obesity, chronic and hereditary pancreatitis, habitual smokers, and those with a family history are more likely to develop pancreatic cancer. And whereas, according to the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, African Americans and individuals of Jewish descent are more likely to develop pancreatic cancer than any other racial and ethnic group. And those over the age of 60 are also at higher risk of being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, with the average diagnosis age being 71 years. And whereas, if you or a family member are at high risk for the disease, it is important to know the symptoms and to speak to your doctor immediately if any occur. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes November 18th as World Pancreatic Cancer Day. And be it further resolved that the County Council encourages all residents of Montgomery County, especially those ages 60 and over, to talk to their physicians about prevention of this disease. And it's presented on the 16th of November today in the year 2021, signed by myself and our council president, Tom Hucker, on behalf of the entire council. And really want to thank you, Dr. Wright, Mr. Williams, and Ms. Walsh for your work. And I know the council shares those sentiments, as I know our council president does as well. So really appreciate you being here today. Council President, I turn it back to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Councilmember Juando and Dr. Wright. I'm sorry for your losses. I lost my own dad to pancreatic cancer in November on Veterans Day in 1987. And so I'm very grateful to you and all of our guests for your work. And again, to Councilmember Juando for raising awareness about this very important day. Unless there's anything else, we can now recess. Councilmember Cass, did you have anything? If not, we can recess until 9:30 to allow our other guests to join us for the rest of the agenda. Thank you all so much. Keep up the good work.
I just wanted to do a sound check. Are we okay?
Hi, Gwen. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, and so you know Casey is with me. We are calling you here.
I just wanted to say before we get started here.
Equin, I think we can resume.
Good morning. We are live in 5, 2, 1.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to our November 16th session. We can now move on to general business. Madam Clerk, could you please share our announcements, our agenda changes, and petitions?
Sure, of course. Good morning. So the council is seeking applicants for the Board of Appeals. The application deadline is December 3rd, 2021 at 5 p.m. And the county council has not received any petitions this morning. That is all.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The clerk has distributed the minutes to the council members for the meeting of October 12th, 2021. Are there any changes? Hearing no objection, those minutes are approved as submitted. The council can now sit for district council. Item 2A is the introduction of zoning text amendment 2110, accessory structures, use standards. A public hearing is scheduled for January 18th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. And then item 3 is our briefing on the Fed committee draft of Thrive Montgomery 2050. Is Chairman Reamer with us? And Ms. Dunn? Ms. Wright, welcome. Director Wright, I think Chairman Anderson is here as well.
Yes, he's going to be joining me momentarily.
Great. Well, I bet you know it by heart yourself. And Ms. Dunn, you're leading us off, Ms. Dunn, and then I have a few questions, and all my colleagues will as well, I'm sure. Right? Okay. So if we can begin without the chairman, that's great. Director Wright is here. I'll throw it to you, Ms. Dunn. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The Fed committee has finished up their work sessions on Thrive Montgomery 2050. They finished on October 25th. The council now has posted on its homepage. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a featured item. It is Thrive Montgomery 2050. It is a page for the plan. If you click on that, this is for the community, you will see what is labeled the Fed committee draft of Thrive Montgomery 2050. So today what you're going to hear, you're going to have a brief presentation from the planning department, sort of a recap of the plan that they've sent, very brief, and then we'll turn it over to the chair of the committee and the other committee members to talk to the council about the changes that were made over the 10 work sessions that they held in the past 2 to 3 months. And with that, so I do have a presentation that's from the planning department, and I'm going to ask if I can share my screen for that.
Great. I think Pam has pulled up the PowerPoint presentation. For the record, Gwen Wright, Planning Director, and with me is Casey Anderson, Chair of the Planning Board. Oops.
Sorry about that. Let me reopen it. I couldn't get it to. There we go.
Great. So the presentation we're going to give you is one that we had shared with the Fed committee, and I think it really, in many ways, boils down a lot of most important elements of Thrive Montgomery. This is a document that we started nearly 3 years ago. And, it's been evolving, and I think every step in the way it's been actually getting better. And I think the work of the Fed committee has definitely continued that, and I think the document that has come out of Fed is a very strong document. If we could go to the next slide, please. What we wanted to emphasize for you is some of the work that has been done to create Thrive. We had individual sessions, over 200 meetings with the community. We've probably had about 12,000 people attending those meetings or providing testimony at public hearings. There have been 3 public hearings so far, 1 at the planning board, 2 at the county council. We have done a lot of outreach that is not traditional, using social media, using virtual meetings. But we've also done a lot of very traditional outreach, including booths at places like the Wheaton Arts Parade, different kinds of in-person outreach as well as virtual outreach. Next slide. We've also worked really hard to reach underserved communities. Here's a list of some of the folks who we have reached out to. And one of the things that I want to emphasize about this is we have tried to reach young people who are really going to be the ones affected by this 30-year plan. We believe that the future is now, and that young people who are very engaged in our county are ones that really need to be brought into the planning process and to have a voice. And I think we have brought a lot of those young people into the process. Next slide, please. What we want to explain is really how the plan is organized. There's been some questions about why don't you have a chapter on environment? Why don't you have a chapter on equity? Well, we have 3 core objectives: equity, economy, and environment. And those core objectives are in every part of the plan. And in fact, that has even been honed and strengthened as we went through the Fed committee work sessions to make that very explicit. The first 3 chapters lay out the foundation about the county's growth. And please remember, again, this is a land use plan at its essence. It is not a futuristic visioning of the county. It's a land use plan. And the first 3 chapters lay out the foundation for really not just should the county grow, but really how and where should it grow, and in what ways, at 3 different scales. The compact growth chapter, which is the first chapter, really lays out the basic idea from a regional and countywide perspective that we should continue to maintain a very compact area for growth in the county, and to reject sprawling into the ag reserve or into other areas. We need to grow in a compact way. The next chapter about complete communities lays out this vision at sort of a community and neighborhood scale. If we're going to be growing in a compact way, what does that mean for our communities? How do we create complete communities where all of the amenities and services that a resident needs is available and convenient to them? That's really what a complete community means, and you've heard about our 15-minute living idea. What that really means is a very simple concept that the services and amenities, the things that people need on a day-to-day basis in their lives, are close by, are available, are things they can get to easily without having to drive long distances. The third chapter, Design, Arts, and Culture, provides guidance at the ground level, down to the design of blocks and buildings, because we know that if we're going to grow in a compact way, if we're going to create complete communities, how we design those communities, how we design our public realm is what's going to make that work. or not work. The other three chapters talk about how our infrastructure, transportation, housing, parks, should support this pattern of growth that was defined in the first three chapters. So in essence, that is how the document is organized. Next slide, please, and I'm going to turn it over to Casey.
So I think this slide builds. I think you'll need to probably click through that, Pam. The vision for growth, or the way that the Compact Growth chapter describes where growth should be focused. The rural areas and the ag reserve in the dark blue areas on the map should continue to be primarily about farming. Rural open space should be preserved, and environmental preservation and stewardship are continue to be emphasized. These areas can absorb some growth that occurs naturally as agriculture evolves, and you have existing residential communities, for example, in Poolsville, which are centers of activity that serve a more rural area. And we're not saying anything in this plan that suggests that that's inappropriate. In fact, many of the recommendations are aimed at maintaining and building upon these centers of activity, even in the outlying areas of the county, in order to serve the people who live there. The second part of this map that I want to call your attention to is the corridor focused growth area, which that's in a little bit, that's the lightest shade of blue, which is along the I-270 corridor, Route 29, and in that area closest to Washington, D.C. That has existing and planned transit, employment centers that already exist, and quite a lot of infrastructure that's already in place. And that's where most of the growth should be focused. That's what the 1964 plan said. That's what the 1993 plan said, and the Thrive really builds on that idea and reinforces it. In between the rural and the most intensively developed areas is what we're calling the limited growth area. Between those two categories, that contains the mainly suburban residential subdivisions where limited growth is recommended to meet localized needs for housing and services with a diverse range of housing choices. We're trying to encourage a mix of incomes, socioeconomic as well as racial diversity, but we're not looking to these parts of the county to accommodate any but a minimal share of the additional growth that we're likely to see over the next 30 years. You see these dots on the map, and they're categorized over there on the right between large, medium, small, and village or neighborhood centers. These are not intended to have precise quantitative measurements of which ones are large, medium, and small, but just to give you a sense of where is it most appropriate to have large centers of activity like downtown Bethesda, downtown Silver Spring, Germantown, White Oak, versus some of the very small but still important centers in the less intensively developed areas like Ashton or Sandy Spring or Poolsville. Next slide. So building upon that, we wanted to show you this map and how the Thrive map compares to the existing zoning. What you see here is that the outline of those areas that I just described more closely matches the existing zoning that's on the ground. So part of Thrive is really about syncing up our big picture plans that are supposed to guide everything we do in land use, transportation, public infrastructure planning to the reality of what's been done, as well as what we're recommending for the future. What you'll also notice about this map is that we are restoring the growth corridor to the East County that was removed from the 64 plan in the 1993 refinement. We think that removing the East County as a growth corridor was a mistake. It has intended to deprive the East County of many of the opportunities for public and private investment that people in the rest of the county have enjoyed. And we think that it's one of the most important recommendations of this plan that we restore that growth corridor to provide a basis for more equitable distribution of economic opportunity, amenities, and infrastructure. Next slide. So Gwen talked about how these first three chapters interrelate to each other at the scale of the county, the neighborhood or district, and the finer grain details. If you could click forward, Pam, we can show some of the build here. In the compact growth chapter, some of the major changes from our previous planning recommendations are to match the growth footprint to reality, as I just described, to restore the East County growth corridor, not just Route 29, but also Georgia Avenue, for reasons of equity and economic competitiveness, and also to focus growth in the centers of activity along corridors within that growth, that general growth footprint that we showed you on the map. This will also, we believe, focus more attention on making the Ag Reserve not only a place where farming remains the primary use and economically viable, but increases its relevance and accessibility to people throughout the county. Next, click there, Pam. In the Complete Communities chapter, as well as the Transportation chapter, we're talking about designing and orienting land use around people as opposed to designing places around cars. That means obviously emphasizing transit, walking, and biking, as I think this council has consistently embraced over the last several years, but also integrating land use with those transportation alternatives to driving, because we're not just trying to get people out of their cars, we're also trying to take advantage of walkability and the design features that make a place safe and attractive to walk, recognizing that there's been a tremendous shift in preferences for living in walkable places, and that's really important to quality of life and economic competitiveness. We're also introducing the concepts of social connection and health as explicit objectives of our land use plans, designing communities in ways that encourage people to lead more physically active lifestyles and encouraging them to interact with each other and to encounter other human beings, as opposed to just retreating to the privacy of their homes, is a really important objective of Thrive, and it's not something you typically see in many land use plans. Also, we're recognizing the significance of information technology infrastructure, and I know that Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Reamer, and particularly have focused on FiberNet and the county's commitment to build out a high-speed data networks, and we think that is complementary to some of the proposals we have in this plan for transportation connectivity. So in order to connect our residents to opportunities for jobs, and of course, it's critically important now more than ever to be connected to sources of information, and that involves virtual connections as well as the physical connections that are the subject of more conventional land use planning. Next click. Last point I want to emphasize is the differences at the fine-grained detailed level that we were talking about. What does it mean to address the details of development in ways that support the centers of activity and the complete communities that we're talking about in that previous chapter? That means recognizing that redevelopment is the currency that we can use to pay for upgrades to amenities and infrastructure, things like putting in sidewalks that were not built when the county was initially developed, reducing impervious surface to get better stormwater performance, and also to make the design of individual development sites conducive to getting out and walking around and not simply driving into a parking garage and having to make a 20-minute drive every time you want to run an errand. Next slide. And oh, yes, and the last click is elevate the importance of design. One of the really innovative ideas in this is to recognize that form-based codes can improve the quality of development, and they're also important for equity and competitiveness by reducing subjectivity in the development review process and raising expectations about the quality of what gets built. We're also recommending incorporating public art, culture into public and private infrastructure projects, and to recognize that the quality of place is really important, not just to make a nice place to live, but to make places more economically competitive. And now I'll hand it back to Gwen for the next slide.
Yes, thanks. Next slide, please. Now we want to explain a little bit about some of the confusion that has arisen over Thrive because there are a lot of different efforts going on at the same time. The umbrella in blue is Thrive Montgomery, which you all received in April, and the Fed Committee worked through the summer and early fall on reviewing. It is a long-range policy framework. It does not change zoning, but it does lay out a vision and a direction for how the county will evolve and grow in the future. I've also said this before, and I'll say it again. The future is now. The change that Thrive Montgomery is reflecting has happened. We did a trends report for you back in January of 2019, I believe, that really showed how the county is changing, and we're really not making change in Thrive. We're trying to accommodate the change that exists. As part of that, we are also, again, as we're trying to complete Thrive, doing a number of other projects which the council assigned to us. First was looking at the idea of attainable housing or missing middle housing, and that came up when ZTA 2007 was introduced in December of 2020, and in March of 2021, the council asked us to take a look before acting on any ZTAs or any zoning changes to really study the whole issue. And we have been doing that, working diligently to do it. And the planning board has had many, many work sessions. We've had many community meetings. We're going to have another community meeting in December and try to put together some good recommendations that we can send to you all this winter, and you all can decide what actions you'd like to take. At the same time, we're also working on the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities Plan. It has been on our work program for many years. It has some innovative ideas, not only about the downtown, but also about some of the adjacent communities that are in walking distance from transit. And you're going to be seeing that document probably this winter as well. So Thrive is looking at the big picture policies. Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities is a specific sector plan, and attainable housing is a study that we are going to be giving you for your decision on how you'd like to act on. We have one last slide, which Casey is going to do. And if you could go to the next slide, please.
So I just wanted to take a second to address some of the misinformation that's been circulating about Thrive. The first, Gwen touched on the idea that Thrive authorizes or mandates zoning for missing middle housing and doesn't address truly affordable housing. I think most of you have probably seen the op-ed in Bethesda Beat that some of the county's leading affordable housing builders and advocates signed on to, endorsing Thrive as including all of the major important strategies that all the affordable housing groups in the county have united in telling us are important to address, not just increasing housing supply, but preserving existing affordable housing, adding to the stock of subsidized affordable housing, addressing different construction types, financing methods. The recommendations, even on housing in Thrive, extend well beyond missing middle. And of course, missing middle is on, I think, 2 or 3 pages of a document that's 160 pages long. The housing recommendations are extensive, and they address every aspect of housing, not simply missing middle. Secondly, the argument that Thrive failed to reach out broadly and deeply, which Glenn, I think, has already covered, so I won't revisit that. The third is the assumption that Thrive's recommendations are about bringing more people to the county or increasing the amount of growth that occurs. I think that one of the fundamental misconceptions about Thrive is that we are targeting 200,000 more people as a goal to try to get 200,000 more people to move here, with Thrive's recommendations facilitating that. That's not correct. the COG forecast, which the council has endorsed in connection with housing targets, assume that we will get 200,000 more people. And in fact, that seems to be probably a little bit on the low side given current population and job growth trends for the region. So the question is not whether or not we would like to have 200,000 or so more people move to the county. It's how are we going to deal with the people that are coming here as a natural consequence of economic growth and population growth over time. Fourth, there's been the suggestion that Thrive is missing recommendations on racial equity in the environment. I won't rattle through the number of times that we mentioned racial equity, environmental sustainability, economic development, but as Gwen has mentioned, these themes are woven throughout the document, and we thought that it was important to include them in every aspect of the plan, not simply to set them aside as topics to be addressed separately as though they were unrelated to the core issues in any land use plan, such as housing and transportation, parks and recreation. Lastly, there is a cost estimate from OMB that I think is extraordinarily misleading, because OMB assumed that we would have more people here as a result of Thrive, but it concluded it was too speculative to try to guess whether or not they would pay any additional taxes. So the fundamental problem with that cost estimate, I think there were several, is that it assumed that the costs associated with more people without assuming the tax revenue. So obviously, if you assume you're going to get an additional 40,000 or so people as a result of Thrive, but you assume none of them pay any taxes, you're going to get a cost estimate that projects that Thrive is going to be expensive. And I think it should be obvious why that's not a helpful or informative way to assess the economic consequences of Thrive for the county. And with that, we'll turn it back to Pam.
Good morning, everyone. So you've had the presentation now from planning, but is a general overview. And I think you've heard some of those things a few times, but I think about 75% of what was in that presentation was stuff that was given to the Fed committee in mid-July. So the full council wasn't at that presentation. And I think it is useful context. I don't know if you see that Chair Reamer is here, if he wants to jump into sort of the highlights of what has happened at the Fed committee over the last 10 work sessions. I'm here too for any questions.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple quick points for colleagues, and then we'll turn it to open the floor for discussion. Council President will manage the discussion. I want to really first thank everyone who has been involved to get to the point. We have a Fed committee recommendation now that is before the body, and it represents years worth of work. First of all, I want to really express appreciation to the planning staff, the planning board. And we asked them to take this on, and it was a huge job, and there were thousands and thousands of engagements with the community to provide opportunities for feedback and to kind of talk through core concepts and make this a community-driven effort. And we did that through the pandemic, and we did it successfully. You know, this was, I think, an unprecedented level of community engagement in a major policy initiative. And you know, we don't have this kind of level of engagement on a lot of other issues that we work through here at the County Council. But in this case, we had dozens of staff conducting hundreds of meetings, engaging thousands of residents, you know, multiples of times. So thank you to the planning board, to the staff, and to council staff. You know, Pam and Glenn did a lot of hard work through the process of getting to a Fed draft, which involved a lot of sitting down at the table with the planning department, with Gwen and with Casey, to smooth out some of the differences. So what you have in this Fed recommendation is a consensus recommendation where Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Friedson, and I came to agreement on issues that came before us that the community was speaking out on. And we were hearing the feedback. We considered the need for changes, and we made changes. And I think generally speaking, I would characterize it as, smoothing it out. There were issues that throughout the documents that we got additional feedback on, and we came to a agreement about some revised language that smooths it out. And as a result, you have a document before you that I think every decision point was unanimous at the committee, and it is a consensus document. As for the need to do this, I think the big picture point I would say is that our master plans are ahead of our general plan. Our planning is ahead of our general plan. Our general plan has not been updated substantially in decades. We are already deploying contemporary, cutting-edge planning concepts when we do our master plans. But if you look back at the underlying plan upon which a master plan is supposed to draw, you will see outdated concepts. You will not see the latest best thinking about directions for the future. And so it was time to sync the general plan up with our practices. That, I think, is a substantial amount of what this document achieves, is syncing up a outdated general plan with the best thinking that we have today. And secondly, the plan does make some recommended changes that the planning team has presented to us today. Revised thinking about the East County, revised thinking about 15-minute living, revised thinking about transportation, creating more options for housing. Without doing any kind of zoning, there's no zoning in the document. Nobody can do anything with their property as a result of Thrive that they couldn't already do before Thrive. It is a guide to our planners. It is a guide to the community process. At the same time, it encourages us, it recommends that we consider new directions and new ideas. And so I hope that as a consensus document coming out of the committee, spending a lot of time working through this, it will be a relatively easy thing for the council to contemplate. And the concerns that we're still hearing often are about things that are not in Thrive. We are hearing feedback about proposals that are not part of Thrive. And so I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that Thrive should be judged for what it is and not what it isn't. And, assertions about what it could lead to, all of the follow-up for Thrive will go through normal council processes, whether that's master plans or zoning text amendments. Everything goes through implementation processes, community processes, dialogues, and discussion. So with that, you have a Fed committee recommendation. I, again, want to thank my council committee colleagues for a lot of hard work. And we recommend this now to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Chairman Reamer. I want to just extend my thanks to everybody that's been involved. I really appreciate all the time and effort that went into this document, the planning staff, the planning board, the Fed committee staff, and all the feedback from our residents that they've provided throughout this multi-year process. 200 meetings with thousands of residents is a lot of serious and time-consuming meetings, and I'm really grateful to you, Chairman Reamer and Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Joando, for all your hard work and long hours and amendments getting us to this point in the legislative process. We're through the committee, we're bringing it to the full council. Not everybody that's been following this document is familiar with our legislative process on other documents. 10 work sessions is a lot of work sessions, so thanks for all your diligence and attention to detail. And as the longtime council member for the East County, I'm very grateful for what was said about the intentional restoration of growth and amenities to East County. That's what residents have been asking me for as their local rep for 7 years, and I think they were asking Councilmember Navarro before me. I just have a few quick questions that I think you've actually mostly addressed already, but I don't think we can say this often enough. It sounds crazy, but people have approached me at events and reached out to me on the phone and believe Thrive will allow someone, either the county or an outside developer, to just take away their house or their neighbor's house. They said they were clearly told that at a neighborhood meeting. So can you address that? My understanding is people still have the same property rights from the U.S. Constitution under the current general plan or under the amended Thrive plan. We want to reassure people that no one can take away those rights. Is that correct?
I guarantee you that nothing in Thrive authorizes the government to take anyone's property in any way that is not true today. I mean, obviously, there's nothing in the existing general plan that would prevent the council from changing zoning on a property. And likewise, there's nothing in Thrive that would require the council to change zoning on any property. And for that matter, even if all the separate recommendations of the attainable housing study were adopted, no one would be required to do anything with their property that they don't want to do. So the idea, and I've heard the same thing, there are some of my neighbors who called me up and said, I'm very concerned, I put my life savings into this house and the government is now going to come in and take my house and make me build an apartment building. That is simply 100% false, and everybody can be assured absolutely 100% that that is not going to happen. That's not, any Thrive doesn't recommend that, and there is no truth to that.
Okay, thank you. And then the related question, you're right, you mentioned at the front end how Thrive syncs up the general plan with our current zoning, and it was said later it doesn't override our current zoning. Can you confirm that for everybody?
Yes.
All our future zoning goes through the normal and the current process with copious hearings and thorough public feedback.
That's right. And I would add to that that nothing in the existing general plan, as it was refined in 1983, prevents a change in zoning, and nothing in Thrive allows anything different or new that you couldn't do today. It's simply a framework for thinking about the future planning agenda and decisions that will be made in the future through all of our normal processes, which, as you know, include extensive public input on area master plans, zoning text amendments, and the like.
And you had addressed the questions I had about why there wasn't a set-aside chapter for the environment or for housing, because those terms appear throughout the document. It's a land use document, but unlike the current general plan, it mentions contemporary concepts like climate change throughout the document, and racial equity throughout the document, unlike our current plan. And therefore, you didn't need a set-aside chapter for each of those topics, right?
That's right. And that bears emphasis that if you don't adopt Thrive, we will be operating under a general plan that does not mention the word race or racial equity once. Thrive mentions it, I believe we counted something like 88 times, racial equity. It discusses racial equity at great length on almost, I don't want to say every page, but certainly I would say at a minimum, every chapter includes extensive discussion of racial equity, environmental sustainability, as well as economic competitiveness. They are suffused, they are integrated, they are woven through every single aspect of the plan. And in fact, if you go through the recommendations, one of the things the council staff has suggested, which I think was helpful for just showing this to people, is you'll see the specific recommendations as they relate to racial equity, economic competitiveness, and environmental sustainability are tagged in the document. So as you go through the recommendations, you can see which recommendations relate to each one of those three objectives, and you'll find that basically almost every single objective addresses at least one or two out of those three major objectives.
And the same is true with climate change, which wasn't widely understood in 1993, obviously.
That's right.
Right.
So last, I think, you know, as I've spent time with the document, I think it restates an awful lot of things that we have adopted in many other documents and policies of the county and state law as well. Smart growth, emphasis on transit, and the newer concept of having everything you need for daily life within 15-minute communities. So we can minimize food deserts and retail deserts that, like we in East County have too many of, and the long commutes that are too common in Montgomery County. So I'd encourage everybody watching to spend time with the document and find out what's in there. But just to you all, how can we help encourage the public to better understand the implications of the document in the short term and the long term?
Well, I think that, as you've said, there's no such substitute for going straight to the source, but we've also provided some FAQs and some summary information on the planning department's website. We've shot some videos. We've tried to make it as digestible as possible. And of course, I have always been accessible, as Gwen has, to any resident. In fact, just last night, I had a resident in my neighborhood had emailed me with some concerns, and I sat down with her and spent 2 hours at Tasty Diner with her, one-on-one, discussing all aspects of housing in particular and other issues related to Thrive. And I'm happy to do that. If I have to meet with every single resident of the county individually, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to spend as much time as possible talking to anyone and everyone in small groups, large groups, or one-on-one. And I know the planning department and Gwen are committed to do that as well. And we extend that invitation even now, even though we're late in the process. And I know the council has taken steps to make sure that there's avenues available for residents who continue to have concerns to speak directly to you. And so I want to just emphasize that that is not something I'm just saying, but that's something I do every single day to meet with anyone who has any interest in these. I never get tired of thinking and talking about this stuff. I actually enjoy it when people come to me with their issues or questions or concerns, and I continue to be open to that.
Okay, so for anyone watching that's a leader of a civic association or the president of a church club or anything else, they should reach out to you, or they can reach out to our council staff, right, to have an expert from the planning department, it might be you, show up and answer their questions, right? So nobody feels like they need to develop their own expertise. They can just bring in an outside resource. Is that all correct?
Yes.
Yes, and I think that is very true, and we are meeting regularly, even now, with civic associations who have questions. The one thing I also want to do is really give the council staff a lot of credit, because if you look through the packets that they prepared for work sessions with the Fed committee, they went through all of the various points and testimonies that they received from different groups. And there are changes that have been made to the document that came out of Fed that are in direct response to input and suggestions made by residents of the county. And so it is not simply a matter of being available to hear and to listen. I do want to emphasize that changes have been made to the document based upon the information that has been received.
Terrific. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks again to the Fed committee and your great staff. Council member Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. And wow, thank you to the planning department, the planning board, and the Fed committee. This has been quite a task, and it's supposed to be a task because, you know, I do look at this, as it was just stated, as the framework for future planning. I do look at this as a futuristic vision, because I mean, that's what planning is all about. And this is very, very important, and it's very timely. I appreciated the way that it was, the framing around how we have already started to incorporate many of these elements into our master plans and into many of the resolutions that we have even adopted, following the lead of the Council of Governments, which has been really important because it's also a regional approach to how we are going to position ourselves for what is here and what is in transition and what is, you know, coming. That is what planning is all about, and it's so tied to everything. It's tied to our socioeconomic development goals. It's tied to responding to the diversity of our communities. I keep going back to this 2020 census results. I keep thinking about how, you know, oh, Maryland is the most diverse state on the East Coast. Yes, and that means that Montgomery County is pretty much leading that charge. And so when I look at the when I look at the document, when I look at this presentation, I can see many elements that we have embraced. The issue of the East County is so important, and I hope that we are able to fully integrate and include facts into that narrative. Interesting that the Washington Post has published a couple of redistricting articles that refer to the history of the East County, because a lot of people still scratch their heads, as Councilmember Hunker said, and wonder, right? I mean, that was why for me it was so important to support early on the inclusion of the White Oak Master Plan and the work plan of the Planning Board when I was a newly minted council member. It was clear that there was an imbalance there, and it was based on historical facts that we all need to understand as policymakers. The issue of elevating design struck me because when we were in the throes of the Wheaton redevelopment project and the library and rec center, maybe people don't realize this, but there were many times when there were proposals to change the design, to shrink the footprint of the library, to spend less money on the type of furniture and the type of things. And I had to go to the mat for the county to say, design is important. Elevating design in particular areas of the county that have been left behind is important because it sends a message, not just to the community that is there, but it sends a message about where we're going. And so all of these elements I so much appreciate because there's a recognition of the lessons learned and how we need to now pretty much, I think, enshrine these as best practices to move forward. That is really important. And I will finish by saying this, the one area that I know for me has been somehow continues to bug me a little bit is the fact that, as I said earlier, the census has been very clear in terms of who we are in the county, where we have grown, and where this plan has the ability to make the strongest impact, which is in those communities that have been pretty much left behind or disproportionately affected by historical legislation and things like redlining and things of that nature. And so it is critical that we take a step back and acknowledge that, despite all of the outreach that has been done, these are weighty and complex concepts that for folks who are very much involved in this milieu of land use, it can be a bit daunting to figure out, right? But imagine if you're not involved in that. Imagine, if you're just like I was before I, got into public office, I did not understand all of these nuances and all of these technical terms and all of these things. Yet, this plan will set the tone for what's coming next, and these communities need to be involved. And so, as you know, I sent a memo because I still believe that now the council bears the responsibility to ensure that we are engaging, that we are explaining, and that we are soliciting feedback from many of these communities who, by the way, I know would be thrilled to support this vision, right? Because it is very much what everybody already understands is needed for a county like ours. I think that we need to own that, and we need to do much more in that space. And I also think that we need to be much more forceful and creative with how we dispel all of those myths that were incorporated into this presentation, because it's no secret that the disinformation and the spinning and all of that has really, really, truly, I think, damaged the civic discourse. And there's still so much confusion. And some folks are capitalizing on that, right? We need to clarify that as much as possible. So I appreciate this, this overall arching briefing. I am cognizant of what this means for the county and for the region, to be honest. I applaud the fact that it's not as if you guys went out and, made up a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, these are things that we're already doing, that we have adopted as general planning principles But I do think that I take all of us to task to ensure that we find the most strategic and effective way to communicate this, to make sure that it's culturally proficient, that it's linguistically proficient, and that the narrative is clear in order for everybody to be able to own this as we move forward. So I know that we'll get to a point where we'll have our sessions where we'll take votes, and I guess we'll have to decide certain things. But I just really wanted to share just my reaction to the overarching plan, and thank all of you involved, because it's quite a collection of best practices and quite aligned again with what jurisdictions across the region are starting to adopt. And therefore, we in Montgomery County are not going to be left behind in terms of this regional ecosystem that is so important for many of our shared goals. So, thank you.
Well said. And it's aligned with what you and Councilmember Glass and I see the Greater Washington Council of Governments pushing us in this direction as well, and in reaching our regional housing goals and increasing our transportation connectivity with the District of Columbia and Prince George's and Fairfax as well, and Frederick. Okay, Councilmember Wright.
And we'll be adopting 2 resolutions this
later
afternoon
today
that are aligned with many other concepts that are here. So again, it's not like these are things that were just, thought about in a vacuum. They're very well researched and really aligns with all of our goals.
And supported by data. Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be brief because I think that Councilmember Navarro and Chair Reamer and Mr. Anderson and Ms. Wright have certainly hit on many of the key points. Again, one of the keys in this whole thing, and I appreciate the time that both Chair Anderson and Director Wright took out to talk with me about many of the myths that are out there in the community about what Thrive 2050 is, and working with my office to help to make sure we were educating our constituents about what Thrive 2050 is and what it is not. And some of the highlights are around, of course, in my area, the importance of the agricultural reserve. And it quite distinctly talks about supporting the importance of protecting the agricultural reserve for agricultural use and the environmental benefits of doing that. It's tremendous. And so it directs future growth away from the reserve so that it can focus on maintaining its character, making sure that we continue to focus on farming activities there. And so, it really closes the loop in terms of just highlighting just how important the agricultural reserve is to us overall in terms of making land use decisions that are going to be future proofing for us when it comes to climate change, when it comes to food sustainability and resiliency, all of those things that matter so much. And so I encourage folks, because the MNC PPC website does have a myth versus fact sheet that's a one-pager. Even if you don't have time to read the entire plan, which is what you heard from Council President, that we encourage folks who want to see the details do. It's accessible, that's there. There are some very simple things that are there that define what Thrive 2050 is and what it is. And so I encourage, as Councilmember Joando says, the millions that are watching at home, to avail themselves of that, because it's incredibly important. And I think that folks will see that, again, as you heard from Councilmember Navarro, this is a visionary document. This is something that's very similar to what we saw in Montgomery Village when it came to Montgomery Village, and what we saw, the vision for that area involved tons of input from many constituents across the board, many meetings. You heard from Chair Anderson how he continues to have meetings with folks. But at the end of the day, the scare tactics and things that are out there that may be purposeful or may be unintentional are ones in which I think that we need to continue to educate folks about really what's in Thrive 2050. And it really is something that, again, is an aspirational document of where we can be and where we should be looking to go. But one of the things I want to remind folks that as I rotate off of this council is that no council can bind a future council. And so from that perspective, the decisions that are made will still rest in the hands of people who continue to serve in these seats, who answer to constituents. The master plan documents that have been approved by both the council and the constituents who elect them will continue to be there and be guiding principles as well in terms of how we see growth and development moving forward. All of those things are still in place. And so for anyone who's still nervous, I just want to reassure folks that at the end of the day, your elected leaders and those that are appointed leaders, like Mr. Henderson and Ms. Wright, also still answer to constituents. And we still have meetings and we still have input. And so nothing is ever a finality. It is always what is tomorrow going to hold. But it does give us some guidance, which I think is important because we need to help us to try and steer us in a direction that we think is going to be beneficial for us overall as a community. That's what Thrive 2050 is about. And so from that perspective, I just really want to thank everyone for all of their hard work, their input, and making sure that we can get to an even better place that means a better Montgomery County for all residents. So thank you guys very much for all of your great work. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thanks, Mr. President. Battling a little bit of a stomach bug, so not firing on all cylinders today. I apologize. So just a couple thoughts. First of all, it's a good thing that so many of our constituents and residents are engaged in this discussion and conversation. We have been flooded by emails and letters from across the county, across generations, across demographic groups, which is a good thing that people are engaged in this discussion because everyone recognizes the opportunity that lays before us. And I think generally acknowledges that, as Councilmember Navarro said, this is a plan. We need plans. But I'll be candid. Most of the concerns that have been raised, at least to me and in my office, are not to the extreme in terms of misinformation. Most of the questions I'm getting are thoughtful, are based on questions such as, I have tremendous flooding in my neighborhood as it is. My basement is flooded all the time. How is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact my community and neighborhood? Concerns around infrastructure issues, which are real. Also, just general questions about, does this really work? Has this been tried in other communities? How is this specifically going to achieve all that it strives to achieve? And is there proof that it will and not have unintended consequences? So I think there's folks that I've reached out that would like for us to vote on this today, and folks that have reached out that would like for us to throw this in the wastebasket and start all over again. And neither is true. We have an opportunity here to further educate our community, especially those that, for whatever reason, didn't attend one of the hundreds of meetings that were done during the pandemic, or for whatever reason are just waking up to this initiative. As the Fed committee indicates and as the planning board indicates, that there's nothing to be afraid of, then there's nothing to be afraid of in making sure that we provide a reasonable amount of information to those that are engaged now. So I think I look forward to the work sessions that we're going to have as we tackle point by point. It is not a simple document. This is the first time the full council has an opportunity to see it. I give a lot of credit to my Fed committee colleagues and the 10 sessions that they had, but the full council needs to see this document and go through it and ask questions in the public and in the open, as we will, as we always do. And so I look forward to the public testimony we're going to be receiving today, the public input that we're continuing to receive. And I think that, as I've learned over the last 3 years, these processes end up having a way of working themselves out in a way that's reasonable, in a way that moves the needle, but in a way that's thoughtful and deliberative. And so I look forward to absorbing all of this. I've already absorbed a lot. And let me just end with 2 points. There is a lot of really great stuff in this document. I mean, there is undeniably some really visioning exercises, as has been stated, to try and create placemaking in our community, to try and ensure that those parts of our county that for whatever reason have lagged behind economically and have not received the amenities that they have wanted for generations, this plan helps provide hope that there is a direction that those things will be coming. And it also, I think, fundamentally, which is so important, and it's been stated several times, but I'm going to state it again, it doesn't make sense for us to, as we go through the master planning process, and I've come to appreciate how everything is so linked in so many different ways, one master plan here impacts another master plan in another part of the county. And so having sort of a general guide that helps connect dots, I think is extraordinarily helpful, but does not preclude us, as again has been stated many times, for us continuing to do the very in-depth review that we will always do and analyzation that we always do. So I look forward, this is sort of, it's not the starting point. I don't know, maybe I don't know where we are, but this is a great introduction to what will be more conversations as we work through this really important issue. So thank you, Mr. President. I yield back to you.
You bet. We've had, many work sessions, of course, people remember on the Bethesda master plan and all of our significant master plans. And I imagine we'll have to have several work sessions on this to make sure council members have their questions answered and feel comfortable. But, we can make the details of that plan moving forward. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I, too, want to join that chorus of thanks, Mr. Anderson, Ms. Wright, and the entire Fed Committee for all of their hard work. We keep saying, and I guess this is to Mr. Anderson, we keep saying that this does not change the zoning in any way. That's what we keep saying. If Thrive 2050, for it to actually happen, would there need to be either zoning changes and or zoning text amendments in order for it to be achieved?
Yes.
The answer is yes?
Yes.
So we shouldn't keep saying, in my opinion, I certainly respect everybody else's opinion, but we shouldn't keep saying, in my opinion, that this doesn't change the zoning. It doesn't change the zoning. That part is true. But in order for it to go into effect, zoning would have to be changed. And I believe that's part of where all of the concern has been from the beginning. This is a land use plan, and we need to have a different land use for economic purposes, maybe not in every way, but for economic purposes that we can possibly have. We are not doing a good job for economic purposes, but we also need to be very upfront with the public and say what this would actually happen. We have another discussion. We have one today, but we have another discussion November 30th. And I encourage each and every person, if they can sign up to be on that public hearing, to tell us. If not, please send in their information. And I also believe that it is very necessary to remind people that this, and the Vice President Alvarez touched on this as well, this is something that is and Councilmember Navarro as well. This is complex. This is not easy. This is affecting in many cases people's lives, because if you're affecting someone's home, it's perhaps their biggest investment that they've had. And we should not take that lightly. We should have good discussions about it. We should not take that lightly. And I also believe that part of it, and I'm in agreement with this, that it's a good thing that we're dealing with the entire county, but it's also becomes that much more complex because we're dealing with the entire county. So I think we need to put this in the right mindset. I believe that speed, if we're talking about a program, something that's going to happen over a 30-year time frame, to saying we should do it by the end of December, to me, does not make sense. We should do this the right way, have people feel comfortable what we're having, and I applaud the fact that you've had the myth versus fact, and I'd like the people that have been saying what is being said is the myth, that they get to discuss whether or not they agree that the facts are the facts. This has to be a process where people either buy into it, they can disagree with it, but either if they don't buy into it, we have to, as the county council, have to be of the mindset to let people know that we are going to hear all sides, and there's parts of this that that we can agree on, and parts of this that we don't. But if we're going to have these discussions, I believe that we need to do it as openly and as transparently, and with keeping in mind that the public has to be a partner in this, and it's not just that we are telling them what needs to be done. They need to be telling us what they believe needs to be done, and that's on all sides. I believe that we should have more affordable housing. Everybody believes that. But the question is, how much would we have to have in a zone in order for that home that is being torn down or whatever, how much of a density in that zone would we need in order for the housing to be built that would be affordable? I believe that, and I have not looked at every word in the document. I certainly will go back and do that. But do you have any idea, Mr. Anderson is right, on how much density would have to be built in order for us to have if you tore down a single family home right now, how much of a density would have to be built in its place in order to have an affordable home there?
Well, I think the short answer to that question is Thrive does not attempt to analyze that question because that requires much more detailed, specific analysis, which is starting with the attainable housing study that Gwen mentioned earlier. But I also want to highlight something that's extremely important that I think has been overlooked by a lot of folks in this process. And that is the 2011 update to the housing element to the general plan. Remember, there was a 1993 revision to the general plan that was comprehensive. It covered, pretty much every part of the document. But in 2011, the council updated the housing element of that general plan. And that housing element authorizes almost exactly the same kinds of housing that's contemplated by Thrive. Thrive puts a slightly finer point on it, to be candid, but the 2011 housing element, which is the law in Montgomery County today, encourages diversification of housing types in much the same way that Thrive does. So I think this is something that has been overlooked in this process is everybody's concerned about, oh my God, what's Thrive going to mean for missing middle housing? The fact is the 2011 housing amendment already authorizes the council to adopt whatever missing middle zoning it chooses under whatever planning process it chooses to use as an avenue for it. It could do it through a zoning text amendment. It can do it through area master plans. In fact, the council did adopt missing middle housing as part of the recent Forest Glen Montgomery Hills plan. You'll recall there were some properties on Georgia Avenue where the council specifically rezoned them to accommodate exactly the kind of missing middle housing that many people are concerned about. So my point here is I agree with you. I agree with everything you've said, that all this requires public input with the public as partners. It requires detailed analysis and understanding of the economics of how much density is required to make various types of housing or other types of real estate development work, both economically and in terms of compatibility and the other public interests that are at stake in development. But what I'm suggesting to you is not only this is a general document for which those other specifics should be and will be worked out as part of other processes, but really what I want to leave you with is We already have the policies in place which authorize almost everything that is most controversial about this plan are already the law in Montgomery County and already part of our general plan. And Gwen wanted to add something.
And I think what's important to note about that is that many of these ideas of diversifying housing types were discussed in 2011. And they were set, as Casey just mentioned, as an overall county policy. But it wasn't meaning that right after that 2011 update to the housing element of the general plan that suddenly wide swaths of properties were rezoned. One of the points that we've made in all of our presentations about how the general plan relates to actual zoning changes is that there can be decade-long gaps. When the original general plan from 1964 talked about preserving agricultural land, we didn't have a TDR program till 1980, 16 years later. And it's not, so I think in relation to what you said at the beginning, Councilmember Katz, yes, a general plan lays out policies, but there is a separate process for delving into how those policies will be implemented. And sometimes it can take literally decades to work out those details and decide what the right actual zoning solution is. In the attainable housing study that we have been working on, we have looked at the specific issues that you have asked about in terms of, could you create actual committed affordable housing as part of a change to a duplex or a triplex. And we can provide all of that information to you in the voluminous study that we're going to be sending forward, because we have looked at all of those issues, and that is something that the council should be very interested in and thinking about in implementation. But I think our point is that Thrive in and of itself doesn't take a lot of difference from the 2011 update to the housing element. It does put a finer point on it. It maybe is more specific about it, but it doesn't change what is already a direction that the previous update to the general plan was given.
When you were talking about the voluminous information that'll be sent, I'm hearing some feedback. I don't know whether it's from me or someone else, but when will that voluminous information be available?
Well, we are going to transmit it this winter, or at least that's our current plan, but it's not as though this is buried somewhere in a file cabinet at the planning department. This has been discussed and briefed in public sessions at the planning board. So there's no secrets here. There's no, this has been aired out, discussed. We're still refining it. It's not that it's in a ready for final form, but I wouldn't want to leave you the impression that, oh, we're working on it, we'll get back to you. We're working on it, and we've already had many public discussions at the planning board, which are available to, and many people, both pro and con, have been watching those and providing their commentary and input. But we're happy to get into as much detail with that as you want to. It's not that we're trying to avoid that. It's just that for purposes of discussing Thrive, we want to make it clear that it's that this exercise simply is operating at a higher level of generality, and those details not only will need to be worked out, they are being worked out, and there's quite a bit of analytical resources and really excellent professional staff who have been working on that task and making public some of the results of their analysis, and we expect to continue to provide more detail on that as we work through that project, which is a separate and later thing from what we're talking about with Thrive.
December
and I appreciate
2nd
that.
is the next
I do.
work session. Just
I'm
so
sorry.
December 2nd is the next planning board work session on this study.
And I appreciate that. I sincerely do. But I would believe that no person that's going to build housing is going to buy a piece of property and not know how much density they're going to have to be able to get from that piece of property in order to obtain what they really want to obtain. And if we're looking at affordable housing, and we should be, then I believe that is a number that is extremely important so that we can have those discussions. And that's part of my concern for the speed of Thrive. I don't know that the answer will not be the answer that we want, but I believe we need to know the answer before we have the discussions. So that to me is all a part of these of how this should come together. And I also, think that we need to make certain that there may be certain parts of, and we talk about the East County. I certainly look to the people that represent the East County. I don't, but the people that represent the East County, I think we should look to them right away. I don't know whether it's necessary that and I'm asking whether it's necessary that all parts of Thrive be considered at the same point, or whether or not we could consider parts of Thrive, as an example, for the East County first, and then go through. This is a 30-year plan. We don't have to do it in 30 minutes. So I don't know how that could fit together.
Well, I will just say that we have actually, we haven't been doing it in 30 minutes. It's been a
No, I didn't mean that. I'm just being flippant. Yes.
But I think there's two parts, I think, to answer your question. One is legally, planning is supposed to be comprehensive. In most jurisdictions, like, for example, if you're in a smaller county like St. Mary's County, they do a general plan update once every 10 years, and that applies zoning throughout the county. They don't do area master plans because they just, you can do the entire county in one fell swoop every 10 years and exhaustively consider every property and every detail. We can't do that in Montgomery County for obvious reasons. We have 1.1 million people, 504 square miles of land. It's very much more complicated and, larger in scope. The general plan needs to be comprehensive legally. It's not supposed to be chopped up into pieces, and because that's the legal framework for the basis of land use authority under the Due Process Clause in the Constitution. The other practical consideration here is, I hope it was clear from our earlier presentation in the slides, this plan is written so it all fits together. So you remember how we discussed how there were the first three chapters about the broader county or regional scale, then the community or neighborhood scale, and then the scale of individual buildings and development sites and those finer grained details. And then in turn, the housing, transportation, and park, recreation, public space recommendations interlock with those recommendations, and that's how you get complete communities. That's how you get 15-minute living. That's how you can start to address some of the issues with reducing people's need to drive, for example. So I think it would be not just legally you're into sort of a gray area of what's permissible in terms of chopping up the plan, but in terms of the logic of how the way the plan was very carefully drafted in order so that all the recommendations reinforce each other. And as I said about racial and social equity and environmental sustainability, they are interwoven with everything. And similarly, the housing recommendations are related to the transportation recommendations, which are related to the compact growth recommendations. These things all fit together, and I don't think that it's really susceptible to being taken apart and, sort of order, I'll take one from column A, but never mind about column D. I hope that's helpful.
And thank you. I'm going to stop, Mr. President. I will yield back to you, but I do appreciate everyone's hard work on this, and I believe we still have some hard work beyond this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Fed Committee and Planning Board and Planning Department as well. This conversation has been really helpful. Listening to the questions and comments of my colleagues, and then the thought processes from planning. I do appreciate that. But just to level set, there's a lot of miscommunication that is out there that my colleagues have highlighted. But at its most basic function, I think it would be helpful to just share with the public really what we are doing. And if my memory serves, the very first master plan that was undertaken here, or at least was adopted, was that the 1964 Wedges and Corridors Plan? Is that correct? I see Director Wright. Okay. So in 1964 was the first real plan, and then the last or most recent general plan that was approved, was that the 1993 plan?
Yes, so the 1993 was an update, or what they called a refinement to the goals and objectives. So it wasn't a full-blown look at the whole general plan. It was a very slim document that was a refinement to the goals and objectives.
And that was, I'm sorry.
And that was 1993. And then there was this 2011 update to the housing element. And that's all the action that's happened.
So 1964 was the original visioning document, and then some minor changes in 93 and 2011.
Correct.
Okay. Well, the original plan was created long before I was born. I don't want to reveal everybody's age who's on the council, but it was before I was born. And clearly we need, an update to this generational document. And so I think we all need to agree that that needs to happen. And clearly the conversation is going forward as to how does that happen? What does that generational document look like, the visionary document? And in just kind of looking around what a general plan should capture, and the idea is that it sets forth for the next generation, or in this case, a generation and a half, quite frankly, if we go by the same timelines. We want our planning document to look at our economic competitiveness, to hopefully maintain our strong federal sector presence, and also a strong biotech industry, and whatever emerging industries will come to the DC region or will be created over the next decades. We want to make sure that we're able to maintain our diversity here in Montgomery County, which currently is home to 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in this country. We want to make sure that we're able to accommodate for an aging population, and Montgomery County has the largest number of seniors as a percentage of our total population currently in the entire DC region. So as people continue getting older, as I get older, we will want to make sure that I and others can be able to live here and manage our lives as best we can. We want to make sure that there's housing affordability, to make sure that our kids and our grandkids can afford to live here, because again, we're talking decades ahead. And then, to cap it off, we want to make sure that we're able to maintain our public health, to encourage active, healthier lifestyles. And then I'd be remiss if of course we want to make sure that our planning mitigates climate change, recognizing the effects of climate change are here now, and we do not know what it will look like in decades ahead, but we already have to prepare for it. We're already flooding. We're already seeing the heat and the extreme weather. And so the future planning needs to accommodate that, mitigate that, and bring in whatever future technology and infrastructure advancements that are necessary. And so that is how I come to this conversation. And that is how I hope we all come to this conversation, the details of which will be worked out as now the full council has this document. We have at least a listening session, I think 2, whatever it might be, to hear more of the public reaction. But it is those guideposts that I'm going to look towards to see and try to build the Montgomery County that we will need for the decades to come, way past any of us being here. And that is really what this document is about. And so as we engage in this conversation, again, I will be keeping all of those factors in my mind. I appreciate the hard work that the Fed committee and the planning department has done. And I look forward to the conversation that we will all have here on the council as how to envision the Montgomery County for the future and the Washington, D.C. region as well. So thank you for your work, and Mr. President, I yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Council President. Thanks to planning staff and council staff. First, I just wanted to thank all the work that has been done. There's been a considerable amount of effort that has taken place between the summer and now, not just in the 10 committee sessions, but really in probably dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of meetings and sessions between council staff and planning staff to refine some of the language, to try to address some of the issues that have been raised. And I think we have a better document today than the one that was proposed to us. I think that it largely reflects the same overarching goals and vision, but it is refined. And that is the point and a part of the process, which I think is important. We took out some language and changed some language that went from what is a visionary document to seeping into implementation, which at the committee we thought that it was not appropriate for a document of this type. And even though it wasn't intended, some of the words that were used were action words, and this is a visionary document, not an implementation document. And so we changed that. This hasn't happened overnight. This has been in the council's work program for multiple years. That's been worked on for over 2 years. We got this as a council. We received this document as a council in April. And I know there's a lot going on and everything that has happened in the world that we couldn't have quite predicted, but we have had this before us for quite some time. The Fed committee met 10 times, and prior to the 10 times that we met during these discussions, I believe we got 3 updates throughout the process, and the full council during the work program discussions had at least 2, and I think probably more than those, but 2 that I can specifically recall in terms of this specific project. Now, this is a generational undertaking. It is a huge deal. We should take as much time as is needed to go through and make sure that everybody understands what it is we're buying into in terms of the vision for the county. But we have been doing that, and we have done that, and we have added public engagement to this with the listening sessions that the committee proposed, and the council president and council are now following through upon. We did slow this process down. Originally, the committee was going to work through July, and it was going to come to the council in September. And it's now coming to the full council in the middle of November. And so the calls for not doing this in 30 minutes for a document that's going to last 30 years, I think that is the process that we have taken. I think we have tried to be methodical and thoughtful and sober. So I just think it's important to note that. Like I said, I think it's a better document than the one we received, and there was a tremendous amount of work into the document that was proposed to us in April, and I think it's even better now. Is there further opportunity for refinement? Absolutely. That's what the purpose of coming to full council is. But it's important that we understand what this document is and what it isn't, what it's intended to be, and that we focus actually on the language that's in it. That I think this council, time and time again, has already supported and adopted. Virtually everything that is in the plan, and those things that it hasn't formally voted on have already been in county law, like we heard earlier with the housing element. These are concepts that have been in place and have been the policy of the county for a long time. Now, are there big questions that are going to come from here on how we actually implement this stuff and how we figure it out, how quickly we do it, where exactly we do it, what the mechanisms we use to do it? Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we separate out those conversations. And I think, unfortunately, even today, we have merged those conversations. And I have said during committee, and I'll repeat here for colleagues, it is very hard to both choose a destination and pick the directions at the same time. That is not a winning strategy. It gets very, very difficult to figure out where you're going. And what the goal is here is to figure out the destination. Where do we want to go? What do we think that the community should look like? What type of communities and amenities should we have? Where should those amenities be? What type of infrastructure do we want to have? And growth do we want to have in the county? And how accommodating do we want to be to the new residents that we expect? And where do we want them and expect them to live? And what type of communities do we want and expect them to live? That's what this is about. It's about the destination. It's about where we want to be. There's going to be a lot of time to figure out the next steps of the process. And I think it's really important that in this document, we make sure that it is a visionary document, that it isn't confused in our own language that we use and conflated in our own language that we use to be implementation, and that we ourselves separate out the processes of where we want to go and the vision that we want to have and the buy-in that we're going to need from the community to do it. And then figure out, once we've decided on that, how exactly we get there. And there are a lot of complicated questions that we're going to have to answer and things that we're going to have to figure out once we get there. Just like the concept of transfer development rights, needed a long time to figure out and to work through before the creation of the agricultural reserve. It might now seem like it was a fait accompli then, but it really wasn't. It was a concept and an idea that needed to be implemented and worked through. The same thing with the moderately priced dwelling units. The idea of having mixed income communities was one thing, but the actual implementation of how do you make that work? How do you make that happen? How do you subsidize without any public dollars through the other units in a development project was novel. And in both of those concepts, jurisdictions all across the country actually followed Montgomery County's lead in creating those types of communities in the type of land conservation and preservation that we initiated. The housing needs, while they may be disputed by some, they have been well researched and discussed for years and longer. And this council has time and time again committed to fulfilling those housing needs. And ultimately, we need to have a strategic plan in order to accommodate them. And again, the challenge is going to be in implementing much of this and how we do that. But that's an exercise that comes after we decide, what is the broad-based vision that we want to have. And we're going to need to work through that at the appropriate time. The last thing that I will say here is this is a strategic plan and a strategic vision for the county. It is not intended to be, nor should it be, an operating manual. This is not supposed to say exactly how we're going to do everything it is that we are looking to accomplish and achieve. And if we are going to sit and debate through exactly how every aspect of this might be implemented over the next 20, 30, 40 years, we will never have a vision in the first place. And so we have to just decide on the vision, decide on the destination, and then methodically, strategically, issue by issue, we're going to work through in a dramatic level of detail that it is required and that is appropriate of those types of massive decisions in due time. And there are lots of aspects of this, not just housing, which has gotten the most discussion. Well, we're going to have to figure those things out. And we have many, many complicated discussions ahead in how to implement. But to start, we have to come up with what is our vision. And right now, the vision, largely based in 1964, does not reflect the county's overarching values and policies that we have been following for quite some time. And we should have a general plan that reflects that. And in fact, we're required by state law to have a general plan that sets the stage for all of the zoning decisions that we ultimately make in the county. So just thanks to everybody. I understand that the Fed committee has spent a lot more time on this up to this point than other colleagues, and everybody else is catching up. But there is certainly a tremendous amount of work that has taken place. And I just wanted to thank again the staff, both planning and council staff, for all the terrific work. Look forward to some robust discussions. This is important of what type of community we want and how we want to build it. And look forward to having those conversations as we move forward and having the buy-in that we need for the vision that we're going to have for the next 30 years.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. Chairman Reamer.
Thanks. Just wanted to add, for my colleagues especially, you can really demystify this in the text of the document. And given all of what we hear, you might be surprised by what is on the written pages of Thrive. Almost everything about what Thrive really means is going to be in future actions. It's a set of policy principles. It's a vision. It's a guide. It's a guide for the future. In some ways, it's a manifesto. It is many things, but it is not the implementation of the ideas, and it is not very specific about how exactly things might happen at a finely grained level. It's far broader. It's a vision like we should grow in the corridors. To the extent that our population grows in the future, it should happen concentrated in our transportation corridors, where housing growth can be the most sustainable, where it can be closest to public transportation. That is a core objective of Thrive, to establish that vision, that we're not going to sprawl out. We're also not going to intensify residential neighborhoods, outside of, we are going to focus our growth in the core transportation corridors. That's a core goal. We saw the map earlier. The map has the reserve, it has the limited growth boundaries, and it has the urban core, or the corridor boundaries. So, as the housing pieces, there's, again, I think for our residents who are concerned about it, please, if you haven't, read the document. Now that it's at full council, you've got the amended version. You can see what refinements or how things were smoothed out, and I think it is a document that is very broad and represents a consensus of different points of view. Again, there were a lot of points along the way where we received that feedback. We thought about how to express or respond to those concerns, and then we adjusted the language. And so thanks again. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Lots been said, so I won't be too long. I do want to thank my colleagues on the Fed Committee and Pam Dunn especially for all her work and herding all of of us in the right direction and helping us to organize those 10 sessions. I want to thank the planning board and staff, Director Anderson and Director Wright and Chair Anderson and all their teams. And I see we've got several of them on as well. I think this is the way that I describe this and why I think it is a consensus document from committee to council. It is a vision document. There are obviously policy differences between myself and my colleagues on the committee, for example. We don't agree on everything. But this document, as a framing document, the concepts that are laid out, the belief in compact and complete communities, the belief in transit-oriented development, the belief in the importance of affordable housing, of equity and equitable growth across the county, of moving towards safer roadways and streets for pedestrians and bikers. All these things are things that we agree with. And I'll give you an example. This document lays out that in the housing parts, that which has been much of the discussion here today, that we should give incentives and tax incentives and TIFs and pilots to incentivize some types of these growth. I'm not against that as a tool in the toolbox, but as you all know, my colleagues know, the public knows, I am against it without certain requirements. Those requirements are not laid out here. That's not done in this document. That will be a policy discussion that we have when we take those issues up. Similarly, attainable housing. I have the ZTA. I was in the PowerPoint. I appreciate you putting me in there, Gwen, with 2007. And I do think I'm really glad Chair Anderson brought up the fact that the action in 2011, and I brought this up in one of our committee sessions, we were already able to do diverse housing types under the current policy. And it was one of the reasons that, I felt very comfortable introducing the ZTA, and we'll consider that in due course. But again, the details of that approach have yet to be worked out. But I do think we want to continue and flesh out the fact that there should be diverse housing types. We do have a housing crisis. We are going to need to have more housing. I've pushed for more language around affordable housing and protection of renters, and that type of language in the document. Again, we're going to have to deal with those details of what that means, and the full council will be involved in that. And so I think this is the right framing document. It updates an outdated plan. It's consistent with many of the things we've already done. And we will continue to have deep and thorough discussion and public engagement around the policies that will come and have already started to come from this vision. So I do think I think it's important to say that, because just because none of us are all going to agree on everything of every particular approach, but I think we can agree on a general vision, and then we can figure out that approach through the processes that come after. And so that's why I'm very comfortable with the document. Nothing's perfect. To Councilmember Katz's point, no compromise is a perfect compromise, as you often say. But I do think this is a good document. It puts us in the right direction. So appreciate colleagues, appreciate the work that's been done, and looking forward to going through it with the entire council in all the public sessions that remain. The last thing I'll say, I do agree with Councilmember Navarro, who mentioned this early when we started the conversation about the outreach. That's something I brought up throughout our sessions, and a ton was done, and it's you can always do more. And one of the things I know about being an at-large council member, you can never talk to enough people. I feel like I'm working as hard and my staff's working as hard as possible, but there's still people who have never heard from us and want to. But we do have to find more institutionalized ways to dig deeper and develop those lists and those groups. And this has happened, but we need to do more, because there are large swaths of people who aren't engaged throughout the process. And, I took it upon myself to try to work with council staff to do some of that. In addition, we're going to do even more. I think we need to really institutionalize both and planning side, because they're further along with us than us, frankly, and on the council side of what that outreach looks like every time. It shouldn't just be an ad hoc thing. We should have a plan. We should have the groups that should grow over time, but we have to develop that institutional memory and capacity. And we're not there. We're not there. And while I think this plan is still good and it goes in the right direction, moving forward with our land use and zoning and all the work we do, but particularly on these more arcane topics, that are really important, we have to develop that muscle memory. So I just wanted to say that as well. But looking forward to going through it. And with that, I yield back, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember. I don't see any other questions or comments. Okay, so if not, thank you so much, Commissioner Anderson, Director Wright, Ms. Dunn, your whole team. Very much appreciate all the work that went into this. Thanks again to the Fed Committee. This is very much to be continued, but we're a lot farther along than we started. Very much appreciate your hard work. All right, colleagues, next, we spent more time on that than we anticipated, but I think that's a good thing. We'll take up the consent calendar next. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Councilmember Rice moves. Councilmember Friedson seconds. Terrific. I bet a few of you have comments. I want to take a moment to draw attention to item B, the special appropriation for a federal relief grant of $252,242,245 for MCPS's operating budget. Even though action on this item isn't scheduled for until November 30th, given the scale, I think we should describe to the public these critical funds that MCPS will receive upon our approval as part of the American Rescue Plan Act 212. The appropriation will make a critical difference for MCPS students. This funding will support the addition of 113 teachers, 32 para-educators, and 50 social workers. The pandemic has obviously had a major impact on MCPS's ability to provide teaching and learning to its students, as well as the mental and behavioral health of our students. So the funding will provide all students, all grade levels, access to summer school programs, including transportation and academic enrichment tutoring programs to address gaps in access and opportunity. We just received new data that laid bare the fact that all of our students, but particularly our Black and brown students, lost ground during remote learning under COVID. That's a crisis, and we should treat it as such, with the urgency that we treated the crisis of COVID, which is why I asked for the briefing a week or two ago on the COVID slide. So the funds we're approving in item B will also provide for the additional counselors and social workers for mental health support that many school staff and parents and students have been advocating for a long time. I've been a longtime advocate for these critical positions. I'm frustrated it's taken this long to approve the funding. I recommended strongly, as did others here, that we should add the funds for one social worker for each high school from MCPS into the FY22 budget back in May when we finalized it. We knew there was that need as we returned to school. It's been requested by many of our principals for 10 years now. And I was still trying to advance that until the night before our budget vote back in May. Dr. McKnight and MCPS was supportive then. I know the administration was opposed at that time and wanted more time to work on the details of their plan. In retrospect, I still believe that was a big mistake. Adding these positions to the budget in May and beginning the hiring process then would have made more sense than delaying, since it's now mid-November and these workers are still not in our schools. But I'm glad we're moving forward. And our teachers and our support staff have had to try to fill the gaps while our students are experiencing a huge wave of unaddressed behavioral health issues, one that we all saw coming. It's now, in November, a more serious challenge finding professionals to fill these positions when so many other school systems and counties had already created plans for these roles. So I raise that now because I want to flag that sometimes we repeat the same mistakes. As policymakers, I believe whenever we have an unmet need and funding, it usually makes sense to act rather than waiting and to require the executive branch to start with the best plan they can make and adjust it as we go along. Other cities and counties take that approach. Waiting often makes things worse and more costly, and residents can suffer. I don't want to dwell on it, but it's very significant. It's a significant appropriation. I'm very, very happy we're moving it today, but frustrated that it's 6 months and arguably years late. Now, Councilmember Navarro recommended in the November 4th joint HHS and ENC meeting, working with our county partners on a budget initiative for next year to incentivize and prioritize growing our own mental health professionals and healthcare professionals so we can have a creative and targeted strategy as an action point. This need is not going away. I fully support identifying that funding and making that initiative happen as well. And also, very importantly, the funding in item B will provide much needed stipends for staff retention and recruitment, $1,100 bonuses for our teachers and support staff. Our educators and our support staff have done heroic work through this whole pandemic. Many say that they've worked harder than they ever have in their long careers to support our students over 20 months. So this is a modest stipend to make sure we're doing what we can to show our gratitude and our appreciation for their commitment and their hard work. And last, this funding will upgrade heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems, which will help address a long neglected budget item that has a direct impact on the health, and particularly the respiratory health of our staff and our students. So thank you in advance for your support of item B. I feel very strongly about it, as you can tell. I'm glad that we're at this point today, moving forward. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I thought that we weren't commenting about consent calendar items, but I guess that's changed now. So certainly as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, let me just say that the committee has been forthright in terms of focusing on this issue since the COVID challenge began. We immediately knew that there would be disparities that would be exacerbated by not being in school. It's the reason why the Black and Brown Coalition and Equity Hubs were funded not only outside of the school system, but inside. And it was at that point, in fact, in which the Education and Culture Committee had a number of conversations with the school system about making sure that we stood up additional support for teachers as well as personnel to support these efforts. So that happened in April of 2020. And then, in fact, it was in Annapolis as the MACO Education Subcommittee Chair, myself and Jack Peterson, who actually penned a letter to Governor Hogan, who originally coined the phrase the COVID slide in Maryland, and actually referenced that and talked about the need for us to make sure that additional resources came from the state to help localities, not just Montgomery County, because we're not unique. We're not unique in the challenges that we face in terms of making sure that we can attract teachers that we need to be support personnel, but also the mental health professionals. That is something that is happening statewide. And in fact, in my role as the National Association of Counties Human Services and Education Chair, this is something that we're seeing nationwide, not just here in Montgomery County. So I want to be very clear that, we appreciate these ESSER funds. We think that they're going to go a long way in terms of trying to help us to incentivize, as you said, Mr. President, a lot of folks and try and make us competitive. Because right now, everybody who's paying the same amount of salary, folks can go wherever they want. So we're trying to be strategic, but we do have to keep in mind that others are doing the exact same thing that we are. Understanding that for us to try and get folks means that we're going to have to pay more. And unfortunately, we have a shortage. We have a crisis when it comes to mental health and support personnel. And so that's something that, again, is nationwide. That's not something that's just unique to us. So at the end of the day, I think that people are really working hard to try and make sure that we provide the supports that are necessary. I know that our committee, the Education and Culture Committee, along with Health and Human Services Committee, chaired by Vice President Albornoz, have been very vigilant in terms of making sure that we put forth a plan and asked our school system to make sure that we were answering the call, and our Department of Health and Human Services to answer the call. And unfortunately, the people just aren't there. And so I would, as Councilmember Jawando always says about the millions that are watching at home, if you know folks that are in college, that are thinking about directions that they're going in, that are looking to graduate, we need people. We need support personnel, especially when it comes to mental health. And so this is a call to action for those who want to be engaged and involved in this, what I think is a very rewarding career to help our young people, especially through this incredibly challenging time, to please talk to folks, get engaged, get involved. That's the best way that you can help. The money is there, but the reality is that the people aren't. And so hopefully with some of these initiatives that are in place, working with universities at Shady Grove and Montgomery College, we can all work together to make sure we're righting the ship and get us into a direction where we can answer the call for our students and make sure that they have the support necessary. So thanks very much.
Totally agree. And you're right. I had asked if I could pull this off the consent calendar. I was told by staff that for some reason, the nature of this item, we couldn't. So anyway, we are where we are. Anybody else on this? Okay. We have a consent calendar that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Item C is introduction of a supplemental appropriation to Montgomery County Public Schools FY22 operating budget, $1,205,690 for trauma and behavioral health grant. Source of funds is a federal relief grant from the American Rescue Act of 2021. That is introduced. Item D is approval of the lease term extension between the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Oops. Sorry, these are all on the consent calendar. I beg your pardon. My notes are a little mixed up. We can now take recess until 1:30. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See you at 1:30.
Work that we're doing.
So there are going to be a lot of people that would like to get involved